Jim?
You see me?
Oh, yeah, I do now. I saw the seal for a second. Okay. I'm here, but I'm going to toggle over and see if I can get the Facebook Live to work.
Okay.
I will be back.
I guess Amy's coming on too.
Oh, she is. Oh, I didn't know. Okay. Well, I just,
2:45 maybe?
hold on one second. She's actually calling me.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Amy, sorry. Okay, I'm back. I think we should be set with Facebook Live. Are you going to Washington Park or to
I'm going to come to the City Hall.
City Hall? Okay.
I had surgery. I overdid it on Monday, so I need to I don't think I could walk.
And I mean, it's so hot. Actually, before this, I just went to Safeway and I got like 2 coolers filled in with ice, and I got waters and granola bars, and it's not going to be enough, I know, but at least for people that are like really needing it, hopefully it'll be something.
And people are going to be stuck in their homes.
Yeah. Here's Amy coming on.
Hey. Ooh, look at all that green space.
Hey, Jim. Yeah, exactly. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for
Good.
working out that deep pave thing. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It was an opportunity that presented itself that I'm excited about.
Now that we'll never see the sports complex. Well, we're not on Facebook Live, are we?
No.
Yeah, I'm also worried about the aquatic center, but that's another conversation.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
I don't yet have Malia in the waiting room, Jim.
Okay. Well, lately she's been logging in right at the last minute,
Yeah.
so. As bright as I can be. phone, sorry.
So Amy, I haven't even read the email, but the Trails End is canceled?
No, it's reconfigured. So all camps have to be at least 3-week sessions. So we have a 3-week Hidden Cove session and a 3-week Trails End session. But Trails End this year is at Alameda Beach, not at Redwood Regional,
Okay.
which is sad, but it makes sense. And we can't travel all the kids up there. And
no, I know. I was talking I asked Henry, I was like, hey, when you rode that bus, how many people rode that bus with you? And he's like, we sat 3 to a seat. And I was like, how is that going to happen?
Exactly. So, and we didn't think parents would have the bandwidth to drive them up and back.
Right. Every day.
Regional. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big debate.
So I don't have,
Hey, Malia.
Hi.
I have one phone number in the waiting room, but I don't have Zach or Mia yet, unless one of them is this phone number.
Jim, do you want to text them?
We could also start, you know, with you and talking about council and Amy and all of that. And one of the phone number could be, I don't know. Hi, Theo. Hi.
He's in his diaper only right now.
Well, that's what I would be if I could.
He's fighting clothing.
Oh, here's Zach Norris. I'm going to admit him. Hold on.
Okay, good. And Mia is, hey.
Hey,
Hi,
apologies.
Zach.
Oh, we didn't start yet.
All right, right on. Good to see you all.
Then, what number do you have in the waiting room?
5, so you're good. Oh, the phone number. Sorry. They left. Yeah.
Well, I assume Mia will use her
Join
name.
regular. Yeah.
I think Mia's going to join via video.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jim, do you want to just go live? Because I know there's people that are.
Okay.
I timed out on my setting up the Facebook Live. Give me 1 minute and then I can,
Okay.
and then we can
Okay.
go.
Okay.
So we're going to talk first about the issue, right? Oh, yeah.
What are we going to talk about first?
I mean, I don't think we can ignore the video.
I just got off the phone with Eric, and yeah, we can talk about that.
Well, he's going to release something at like 4:30.
Yeah, at City Hall.
So
And I was just on the phone with Robbie.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna go live and bring people in, and I'll be right back.
You wanna kick it off, Malia? Or you want me to?
You can go ahead and start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a town hall with council members Jim Oddie and Malia Vella. I'm Sarah Henry, the city's public information officer, and I'll help moderate today's event. Council members Oddie and Vella have invited AUSD Board President Mia Bonta, Zach Norris from the Ella Baker Center, and Amy Wooldridge, Director of ARPD, to join us today. Please note, all participants have been muted. To submit a question, please use the chat feature. Following remarks by our speakers, they'll be available to answer your questions. I'd now like to turn today's town hall over to Alameda Council members Jim Oddie and Malia Vella.
Thank you, Sarah. Just want to again give a shout out to Sarah for all the hard work she's been doing in the last few months, working weekends, and at least we gave her the weekend off a while back. So Councilmember Vella and I have been trying to do these quite frequently. We didn't do one last week. So since we've had our town hall, a lot has changed in our country, in our world, and in our city. So we thought, well, one, we need to make some comments on it, and two, we wanted to have some guests come and lead a conversation. I know with everything going on, and I'll just say this, as a white person, what I've been reading is, it's time for people like me to listen, pass the mic to our Black brothers and sisters, and support what they'd like to see happen. So that's what we're going to do a little bit today. But before we turn it over to Zach and Mia Banta, who's our AUSD school board president, I want to just make a couple quick comments about the video that's been circulating around, and I think my colleague would like to also. First of all, I want to echo the police chief's comments yesterday. There's no place for that type of behavior in Alameda. In my mind, I think that if you are a bad actor, whether you're on the police force or whether you're not on the police force, you need to be held accountable. Our city manager has looked in, is doing an investigation. I understand he's going to be making a statement about 4 or 4:30, so I'm really interested in hearing what he has to say. But I think long-term, well, not really long-term, in the immediate term, for the long-term, I think we need to look at all of our policing policies under a new light, and not backwards, and not being critical and not attacking those that have come before us, but how we can make them better going forward and make sure that every one of our citizens has what the Constitution guarantees, equal protection under the rights and under the law, and that equal protection does not just apply to privileged white people. So I'm going to turn it over to Malia, and then we'll have Zach say a few words, and then we'll have the dialogue and ask questions.
Yeah, and I thank you for that, Councilmember Oddie. I just want to respond. I'm actually very happy that I've received the number of emails and messages that I have calling for change based off of the video. I think it's sad that that's what needs to happen in order for change to occur, is that people need to be, people of color, Black men in particular, need to experience trauma in order for our community and trauma that is then recorded in order for our community to speak out and ask for that change. I think that it's very easy to give platitudes and to say nice things. I think this is the first time that I really have felt like our community is asking for some real meaningful change, and people from all across our community. I do want to put out there, and I spoke with Robbie Wilson, I want to apologize, and I want to apologize to members of our community who we have told you can trust us, because I think, and I certainly feel this way too, I was lied to. I saw a post on Reddit 12 days ago. I sent it to our city manager and I asked him about what happened. I was given a response. That response was not what I saw in the video that was posted yesterday. And so I understand how people are feeling upset and why there is distrust, and it's because you were lied to. And so I want to say, as a member of City Council, I'm sorry, and I want to work with you on building that trust. And I think part of that is having these conversations that are difficult, accepting our part in being complicit with what has gone on, and then dedicating ourselves to making meaningful change based not just on what we're telling each other or internal suggestions, but going outside of ourselves and outside of our structure and our system, and working with the community, working with the Black community, working with our nonprofit leaders who specialize in reviewing policies and things like that, to find a better way forward. And sometimes I know that there's a lot of different energy out there, and some people are very angry, and I think I want to say it's okay. It's okay to feel that way. We then need to just, we need to take that energy and we need to make the change that we know needs to happen. So I just want to put that out there. And I also want to recognize the other reason that we're having this conversation today, and that's because we have a number of individuals who have been murdered, and they've been murdered at the hands of police. Zach, I don't know if you've seen the video that was circulating here. We had a young Black man who was exercising on a street who was physically restrained and then handcuffed by a number of police officers and then questioned. And I mean, it's so upsetting, and it's triggering, and it took the release of that video for these conversations to happen. And when I saw the post, all I could think about was Ahmaud Arbery and the fact, like, and I think that what I also want to talk about today is what can people do? And one of the questions that I want people to ask themselves is, would I make this phone call to police if this was not a person of color? You know, so I think there's a number of different aspects to this. I think it's not just policy. I think that there's some broader societal changes that need to happen. And I'm really interested to hear from Zach today about his thoughts and perspective on all of these topics. So thank you for joining us today, Zach.
Thank you, Councilmember Oddie. Thank you, Councilmember Vella, for having me. I appreciate that context, and I think the reality is there isn't a city or a town in this country that doesn't have that history and ongoing practice of structural racism. It is unfortunately baked into our present day reality. I was born in 1977, in the late 70s. And since I've been around, what I have seen growing up and as an adolescent and as an adult is a misplaced set of priorities. From 1980 to 2000 here in California, we built 23 new prisons and just 1 new university. In cities across the country and here in California, the lion's share of city budgets go towards paying for police departments. In Alameda County, we just saw the Board of Supervisors approve $300 million for a sheriff's office that has been unaccountable to the community, that has caused the deaths of dozens of people in its care in the last 5 years, whose office has retweeted the alt-right. And so these aren't issues that are far from us in the Bay Area. They are issues that are present to us. And we have an opportunity to do something different in this moment. As an organization, we at the Ella Baker Center talk about the need to invest in books, not bars, jobs, not jails, healthcare, and housing, not handcuffs. And we basically say that we want to see public health solutions to public health issues. And what has happened in this country over the past 4 decades and beyond is that policing and prisons have become the public health infrastructure of last resort. And in many ways, the public health infrastructure in quotation marks of first resort, because as we've continued to make cuts to different social services and social programs and affordable housing and even to schools, we have not touched policing budgets. We have not really addressed the imbalance that is present. And so what I like to say frequently as I can is that we can't think about taking care of public safety if we haven't taken care of the public. And we have a public safety policy that doesn't really take into account what actually makes communities safe. The safest communities aren't the communities with the greatest police presence, but the communities where young people believe they have a future ahead of them, where people have good job opportunities. And I think that we're seeing that, and I'll close with this thought because I'm not sure how long you want me to speak for, but we have for so long said, you know, public health solutions to public health issues, right? We never thought we needed to say, let's have a public health solution to a global pandemic, right? Here is the most obvious public health issue that there is, a global pandemic, and yet from the highest offices in the land, from the president himself, we see this same scapegoating, this same direction of negative energy to communities of color. This same law and order rhetoric of, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, really deplorable language that demonizes and puts a target on the backs of communities of color. And so if you see people protesting and being out in the streets, it is because Black people are tired of dying. We are tired of dying from hunger. We are tired of dying because we don't have shelter and are being told to shelter in place. Like George Floyd, when we try to survive, we are being killed by the police. And so this is an issue of life and death because, quite frankly, our government systems have prioritized governing through fear, which has too often resulted in death, rather than governing through the support of our communities and sustaining communities through a strong public health infrastructure that includes schools, that includes job opportunities, that includes basic health care. And so that is why we are really demanding in this moment a shift of resources. And that really starts with the leadership of local elected officials such as yourself. So I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you all.
Malia, you want to?
Yeah, I think, Zach, and I really appreciate what you had to say. I think, are there suggestions for things we can do? I know you're saying it starts at the local level. What are the types of things cities can do to review? One of the things that our city manager, I think, is going to come out today, this afternoon, and say is that we're going to be reviewing our policies and things like that. Do you have some suggestions about that? Oh.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I think that we've grown in our familiarity in terms of the language of systemic racism, which I think is a really great start, that people are no longer viewing the problem as the problem of isolated individuals or just the predilections of a couple bad apples, but are really looking to systemic solutions. But I think, quite frankly, in the context of what we're seeing and in the presence of this global pandemic, acknowledging that every city government is going to have to make hard choices as it relates to their budgets. One of the calls from communities across the country is to begin to reinvest resources into community-based solutions for public safety. And so I often lift up the work of the Richmond Office of Neighborhood Safety, which has done incredible work providing a mentorship program for young people who were formerly involved in the violence within that city, to provide monthly stipends, daily positive contact and mentorship, as well as travel opportunities. And through that program, they helped drastically reduce violence in the city of Richmond, which was a huge boon to those young men who had been involved, but also to the city as a whole. And I think it's an example of thinking outside of the box when it comes to community safety. And those are the kinds of opportunities that I think are present in this moment. So city officials could be, for example, supporting the governor's call to close youth prisons in the state of California. I think it's a huge opportunity to send a signal that city officials are saying, yes, we can close these youth prisons. We can bring young people back to their communities where they're closer to their families and their homes. And we can invest in community-based programs that, guess what, are less expensive and proven to be more effective. The least effective and most expensive intervention for young people who have been involved in the justice system is actually sending them to a youth prison, which really tracks them into the adult prison system. So I think that there are those kind of clarion calls that city officials could be supporting. And then, taking a hard and honest look at your own budget And I'm not as familiar with the budget in Alameda, but I will say in Oakland, one of the things that we're asking the school board and city council to look really hard at is the fact that we have a $6 million budget for police in schools. And we have seen the devastating impact that's had on Black and brown students. And we have seen the way in which it has furthered and worsened a school to prison pipeline. And frankly, some of us has personally seen that police force being utilized against protesters at school board meetings who were bringing their children to those school board meetings. And we think that this is an opportune time to say, let's move away from policing in schools and towards actually supporting the kinds of interventions, counseling, and other things that I have seen in my life be most effective to help young people.
So I'll take the next one. Zach, I appreciate you talking about Devon Bogan and the Richmond effort. I mean, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on it, because I think it was super controversial when he made the proposal, and I think they were running, what, 50 shooting deaths a year, and I think that was dropped down into like low single digits. But what things can we do if we're going to take a look at our policing policy, which we need to? I mean, what do we have to do to make it better? I mean, what type of things do we need to consider, and what resources are out there for us? Because I don't think we can do this internally. I think we need assistance.
It's a really excellent question. And I think the first thing to understand is that we have put police in an unfair position. We have told police that you are the first responders when it comes to mental health crises, when it comes to school discipline, when it comes to drug use and abuse, when it comes to homelessness in our streets. We have told them that you are the first responders to everything, right? And the reality is no individual can be trained as a first responder in all of those situations. And so the first thing I think people need to understand is that we need to fund a robust set of first responders and interveners and a public health infrastructure that actually is appropriate to the task of the problems before us. Because we have divested from all of those things that helped keep communities safe and stable over the past 40 years, if not longer. And so there has to be a move towards understanding that we don't just need a 911, maybe we also need a 311, and we need to robustly fund it so that, as you were saying, Councilmember Vella, like if someone is seeing someone and they're like, I don't think they belong or what have you, we can have them start to have that educational process to hopefully be able to see the humanity in that person of color, in that Black person, in that brown person, in that differently able person. And then to know that there are ways that they can respond to what they're seeing in a way that will bring help, not harm to that situation. And I think once we do that, we can begin to have serious conversations that don't just include law enforcement, but include a more robust set of actors. And there are really great programs. I know this is going to sound like a plug, but partly it is. I wrote a book called We Keep Us Safe, Building Secure, Just, and Inclusive Communities. And what I do in that book is retell 3 different stories that end in tragedy, and imagine all of the different intervention points in the lives of those families that would be instrumental for them not to be involved in the criminal court system, and frankly, for death and murder not to happen at the end of some of those stories. And I had to pull from examples across the country. And I think when we're at a moment like this, when so much is clearly not working, or working towards ends that we don't like, that we really have to do a more wholesale assessment and begin to look outside of our kind of circles of influence and say, hey, I saw that in Memphis, Tennessee, they have this mental health crisis response that they're using, or Portland is the same thing. And so there are different models in cities across the country that we can be looking to, and I'd be happy to share some resources via chat and offline as well.
I don't know, Sarah, do we have any questions?
We do, but they're not specific to Zach or the Ella Baker Center, more about city policy. So I don't know if you want to continue and get to the questions in the end.
Okay.
You let me know.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll ask you this question because I think you're a dad, right? You have two children, and you know, I never had to have that conversation with my girls, and I never had to worry about getting meat on the ground for 8.5 minutes, or you know, having some woman call the police on me while I'm bird watching, or jogging, or exercising in the street, or sitting at Starbucks, or going to CVS, and you know, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think what's important for folks who look like me is to have some type of empathy. So maybe you can kind of share what that's like and how you talk to your children, and you know what basically, just to be brutally honest, white people should tell their children.
Yeah. I'll first start by saying I am terrified for my two kids. They are Black and brown. My partner is South Asian, African American, and they are darker skinned than I am, and they are female. I feel like they represent kind of a trifecta of vulnerability in that regard. I was just on a call with Keith Watley, who's an African American man at Uncommon Law. And he was describing just going out in his daily existence, and being light-skinned African American, I have some privilege that I recognize. And so I approach this conversation understanding that privilege, understanding that it's not just across races, but also among races that these racial disparities show up, that the lighter your skin is in a courtroom, the lighter your sentence is likely to be for the same set of facts. And so, you know, my kids have been involved and engaged and paying attention to the work that my partner and I have been doing. So it's an ongoing conversation for us. It's a daily conversation. And I guess I would just ask people to understand, as white folks, that in the history of this country, the separation of families, the separation of individuals from their families is ever present, and it has been used as a strategy to demonize particular individuals. And it doesn't just start at the beginning of our history, it continues on to the kind of youth super predator mythology that was being put out a few decades ago. And so when you can isolate an individual from their family and say they don't belong to a family or community, it can be that much easier to heap punishment and fear onto those individuals. And I would offer that we should be knowledgeable about that history, and we should be sharing with our loved ones those stories as they're growing up, so that people have a built empathy for understanding all of our humanity. And one of the ways we've been successful as an organization, and I'll close with this, is that we have helped remind legislators by bringing mothers and grandmothers to the state capitol and saying, we have traveled 250 miles just to see our children and grandchildren, and this is the conditions we faced, and these are the hurdles we had to overcome. And I think that helped to disabuse some of those state legislators about some of those stereotypes in a way that helped to bring about change to the youth prison system in California. And so I believe that it is possible. It takes education and some level of dedication. So I really appreciate the question.
Here's another question for you, Zach, coming from somebody who is saying that they're a college student, that they have gotten the opportunity to study civil rights leaders like Ella Baker and James Lawson, other folks at SNCC, Bayer Rustin.
who focus so much on internalizing the principles of nonviolence. But right now, they say it's hard to tell where the tides of protest are going. A lot of people feel like the rioting is a natural reaction to the conditions and they can't disagree. But where do you think young people can build on nonviolence out of the struggle?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that question because there is a real battle going on for the moral authority in this country. And I think that, you know, there sometimes is a false dichotomy that is put out between reform and revolution. And an idea put out that, you know, only the people who are doing violent acts are for revolution. But I think that Martin Luther King, if you listen to his words, was all about a nonviolent revolution in this country. He talked about the triple evils of militarism, racism, and poverty. And we see those things being played out on a daily basis with communities of color, indigenous folks, Black folks having the highest rates of COVID deaths and infections, highest rates of inequality and homelessness. And so there is a fierce urgency that is life and death. And I would remind anyone who would disparage folks who are in the streets and taking action to remember two things. One, we don't know who is doing what. And there have been credible accounts that there are white supremacists who are infiltrating protests and causing the foment of violent acts. And so we have to pay real attention to that. That's a real thing, unfortunately, in this country. The second thing I would ask people to remember is what Dr. King himself said, is that those who make nonviolent revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And I think it's on us to really think about the level of systemic change that is needed in this country and to pay positive attention to it and to move in that direction towards a life-affirming government that holds up the basic fundamentals of human dignity that include healthcare and housing and a decent education. And those are the things that people are demanding. And frankly, if elected officials aren't behind those things, I think that they are part of the problem, that we need to really quickly move towards sustaining the kind of government that helps to move towards what I describe as a care-based approach to safety rather than a fear-based approach to safety that really scapegoats entire communities.
Zach, just one other thing. Somebody asks if you'll be joining the protest. There's a protest in Alameda today at our Washington Park at 3:30, and someone asked if you'll be joining. I think you're very welcome.
I appreciate the invitation. Unfortunately, I can't make it at 3:30, but I will be participating in some of the protests thereafter. So I appreciate the invitation.
I just want to give you a chance, Zach, because I've known you for a while. I think I met you when you were honored, and when Van Jones came to Oakland. I think that's when it was. Mm-hmm. And can you just talk a little bit about Restore Oakland, because it's right across the bridge from us here in Alameda, and I don't know how many people in Alameda know about it, but I think what you're doing there is amazing. And it'd be great if you can toot your own horn a little bit and be supportive.
I appreciate that question, Jim. As you said, we have been at this at the Ella Baker Center for some time. The Ella Baker Center is named after Ella Baker, who's a brilliant Black woman, a leader in decades of struggle for freedom for all communities. And she believed in the power of everyday people to make change. And so we continue to build on her legacy by organizing members and pushing for a books, not bars, jobs, not jails, healthcare and housing, not handcuffs agenda. But quite frankly, for much of our history, we were stronger on the not handcuffs and the not jails and the not bars than we were on the actual positive vision of what we wanted. And in 2015, along with Forward Together and 20 other community-based organizations, we did this national community-driven research project And people said, we need restorative justice. We need economic opportunity. We need to be able to stay in our homes in the Bay Area in order to feel safe. And that was a report that was picked up by the Washington Post and New York Times and CNN. But they heard mostly the message around the cost of incarceration, which was a key message. We wanted that to get out there. But we also wanted this vision that families, that survivors of crime, formerly incarcerated folks and their families were saying, this is what we mean by community safety. And so what we decided to do is to try to put that into brick and mortar form, this new vision of what community safety should look like. And we developed Restore Oakland with that in mind. It's an 18,000 square foot building that we purchased in 2016. We had a lot of challenges along the way, but we just opened last year. It will have a restaurant. Obviously, many restaurants are closed, and we decided not to open given the global pandemic. But it'll have a restaurant run by formerly incarcerated folks and others who have been locked out of opportunity. Restorative justice programs for people to be held accountable and yet still held in community, as well as just space for organizing, a space for Causa Justa Just Cause to do its work to help people stay in their homes and fight evictions, and really for different community-based organizations to hold elected officials accountable, and to ensure that they're moving resources in the direction of actually supporting and sustaining community safety from a long-term public health perspective, rather than continuing to double down on some of the errors of the past, which we believe have just worsened cycles of poverty and incarceration rather than the opposite. So that is what Restore Oakland is all about. People can go to restoreoakland.org to check it out. And we think it's really come as an opportune time, because we need to be able to imagine a different public safety future. Just as wind turbines and solar panels were helpful in terms of imagining a different energy future, projects like Restore Oakland, the work of Devone Bogan and others, I think will be instrumental in really shifting the tide towards a more public health approach to community safety.
Cool, thank you. I mean, I see that our school board president, Mia Banta, has joined, and I think Mia has a unique perspective given her background, and I think her kids are not triracial, quad, what do you call it, quad? They represent the best of America and, all four ethnic groups, and she's also been super busy with all the changes and upheaval at the school district, so we thought hers would be an excellent voice to add to this conversation. So I don't know if you had a chance to hear what we've talked about, but feel free to, share, just share what your perspective is.
Thank you for having me, and I apologize for joining late. I was actually in a conversation very similar with my team at the Oakland Promise, and I could not leave that conversation to be a part of this. This is this potentially a different moment in time for us as a country and as a city. And I think the reality is that only time will tell. Only time will tell whether people feel personally affected in a way that causes them to change their behavior, change their outlook, and change their perspective. And I am I'm hopeful, but I'm far from confident that we will be able to take this moment to be able to do that as a city and as a state. I think one really important thing to note is that we are hours away from, less than an hour away actually, from a youth-led moment and opportunity for our youth who are leading us in many ways in this moment to speak to some of the harms and hurts that they have. And I think it's our job as adults to listen and to support. And I'm thankful that I can be a part of that as an adult. I'm thankful that I can be a part of the conversation as a woman of color, as a a woman of African descent, as an African American woman, as an Afro-Latina, in this moment, it occurred to me that there aren't very many public officials in the city of Alameda or related to the city of Alameda that are African American, and I think that is a challenge for us because we don't have the offering of that perspective in our leadership. And so I appreciate being included in this conversation, and know that one of the things we have to do is make sure that we are better representing the struggles and the challenges and the opportunity that many of our Black colleagues and Black community members have long made us aware of, and that we have chosen, for whatever reason, not to truly listen to or take action on. So thanks for having me a part of the conversation.
Sarah, do we have any questions for Mia
Well,
or Zach? Or?
Somebody was asking specifically for more information about the protest today at Washington Park. They've been looking for more ways to participate with their family, their 10-year-old son, and they couldn't find much information.
I know that they're kind of starting off at, starting off at about 3:30, and the end point is City Hall. It was student driven. It's generated by a student at NSNL and some other students there. And I think the way that you participate is you show up with a mask, show up with peace in your heart, and be there.
And the march is from Washington Park along Shoreline. They'll walk down Shoreline and then down Park Street, I believe, to City Hall, and that's at 3:30 today. We're anticipating getting to City Hall between 4:30 and 5, and then we're going to be hearing from some speakers like Robbie Wilson, our students. Mia, I think. Mia, are you speaking?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think this is a great opportunity to hear from our students, and I know that they're inviting the entire community to join them. One thing that was shared at a meeting I was at earlier was if you have extra water and snacks to bring them. It is hot outside. We want people to stay hydrated. I'm going to be walking the first part of it and then driving over to City Hall, and we'll bring some snacks and stuff for our folks who are doing the full walk. We also have another event on Friday. Mia, are you part of that one too?
I may be participating, but I don't know that I can come out.
There's going to be a car caravan for folks who don't feel or who aren't able to, or aren't able to participate today for whatever reason. There's going to be a car caravan from NSNL High School to City Hall on Friday. I believe it's at 5 p.m. Sarah, do we have the details on it?
I can pull it up. I think that one is 5 p.m. Yeah, but I'll pull it up and put it in the comments.
And much like the event that took place this weekend in Oakland, where I think the ask is that the cars, put signs, put decorations on your car, and really, join in the caravan. I think this weekend there were 4,000 cars that participated in the caravan that took place in Oakland.
Here's a question for Mia. What is AUSD doing to create equity for the 2000 and 2021 school year? Equitable is not equity. There needs to be hard conversations on how to educate the poor.
That has been of primary concern. I think, interestingly enough, when we first got out of the gate for distance learning, we took kind of a pretty hardcore equity stance in how we were being able to kind of launch distance learning. We wanted to ensure that students had access to internet, had access to devices, and wanted to make sure that there wasn't any kind of forward movement without everybody being able to have the opportunity to be able to do that. That approach was met with mixed review, I think, because people are just kind of coming at their access from different starting points. But I really appreciated the fact that our staff and superintendent kind of led us in the direction of making sure that everybody could have the ability to be online and participating. I think the next year, what holds for us is that we've now kind of been through this emergency state, and the reality is that we're kind of taking a lot of time to make sure that the issues related to access, not only from a digital and kind of technology standpoint, are met, but more importantly, that we're doing a lot to be able to differentiate learning and differentiate instruction over the course of the fall and the next school year, so that everybody is able to come into the school year wherever they left off, in a way that will allow them to be able to get content and instruction and be able to come up to where they need to be from a content standpoint. So specifically, things that we're doing are early assessments to be able to understand the extent of learning gap that may have occurred for people, being able to do a lot more cost-centered work, so making sure that we have teams of people who are focused on the different kinds of needs that some students might be able to have, might have as a result of where they are in interacting with both COVID and the economic depression and the lack of connectivity, and we're by the student trying to get an assessment of what is happening so that we can move forward with supporting them in the way that we need to. Because I agree, equity does not mean equitable.
Here's a question for either Jim or Malia. Are you going to investigate Sheriff Ahern's authority to enforce the county curfew?
Well, I can start with that. I want to. I think we had this discussion last night that if he extends the order past Friday morning, that we're going to have a closed session to consider a legal. I personally believe that we in Alameda are best equipped to make our own decisions and our own choices. That goes the same for the folks in San Leandro and Emeryville and Berkeley and Oakland. And I have some serious questions about whether the sheriff has jurisdiction over our public safety in Alameda when we have our police force and our own emergency operations director. And I'd like to learn more about it. So it's very disconcerting that I think maybe Zach or Malia may have mentioned it earlier. This is a sheriff that's retweeted Trump tweets. Mm-hmm. So given everything in totality with the COVID orders and the curfew orders and the occupant of the White House threatening military action against American civilians, it's problematic. So it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight. And from what I understand from the city manager, he's not planning on imposing a curfew, but yet we have the county one. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I think it's worth adding that we were unanimous in saying that we are, as a council, creating policy that that requires our police officers to deprioritize enforcement of the sheriff's curfew. So he can have his curfew, but if we don't have a curfew here in Alameda, and currently we do not think it is a good use of resources to be going around issuing citations. I think there's a number of concerns about the extent of his jurisdiction. I don't know why we would have our own police force and be a charter city, but still be subject to his authority in this regard. And I think, there's not a lot of legal guidance. I don't know that this challenge has really been brought up in recent times. And I know a number of other cities are also looking into it. And I would also put out there that one of the questions that I had was, these curfews allow for people to be stopped basically for being outside 1 minute after the curfew starts. And the county curfew includes a very, I think it's $1,000 citation, up to 6 months in jail. Zach, you were talking about how work we need to do to decriminalize things. And I think part of our concern is, while the sheriff can have his reasons for enacting a curfew, there are First Amendment concerns. We're starting to criminalize just being outside. And I think, as a parent, I think about, it's a hot day. Now you can't be outside as soon as it gets cool out with your child. You can't. Essential workers are worried about getting to and from work. That was the question I brought up as well. And I don't think we have a solid answer. AC Transit, I was on a call earlier, AC Transit has stopped service. So some of our hospital workers, for instance, can't get to and from work because they rely on the bus. And so I think there's a lot of, and what council was discussing last night were all of the unintended consequences of these curfews, and where there are discrepancy, what that means. So I think we might be having a special session to think about what actions we'll be taking.
If I could just, can I just add a couple things to that, because I want to make sure this got out. I mean, lost in all of this, people seem to forget that an unarmed man was murdered last week. So let's not forget that. And I think I shared something on Facebook, and it just encapsulated exactly the problem that I see it. I'll just read it really fast. It says, the priorities in American life are wildly disordered. First comes white health and safety, then comes white property and goods, then white economy, then white comfort. The safety of black and brown bodies, the right to not be killed by the police when you're not a threat, the right to not be pepper sprayed or tear gassed while a respiratory disease is already ripping through your community at an alarming rate, is miles behind white comfort. So I think we have our priorities all screwed up, and it's, it's up to people like Malia and I and Mia, Lisa, and others, change those priorities. So I think we can't forget that a man was murdered.
Well, I'll just add to for the Friday protest, I just pulled it up, and it starts at 4 o'clock at Encinal High, which is 210 Central Avenue here. And it's a Justice for Floyd Alameda protest and car march. Starts at 4 o'clock Friday. And then there's a question. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly appreciate Councilmember Vella and Councilmember Oddie, the stance that you're taking on this curfew. I think in particular, given the fact that we have some civil actions being taken today and protests getting taken today, which will largely have many students, and I am fearful that any of it for our students and anyone who comes out, that they will be respected and allowed to kind of gather peacefully and have their voice heard in a way that doesn't put unnecessary burden on them with a curfew in Alameda.
I do have another question that has come in for Zach, which is that at the beginning of the COVID crisis, this person talked to some folks in organizing, saying that things will never be the same. Now, with what's happening the last week and longer, does that statement mean anything more or different than it did a couple of weeks ago? And do you agree with that sentiment just in regards to the impact of COVID?
Question being that this moment is different than any before it?
That things will never be the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think things aren't the same. That the recurrence of police violence is an ongoing tragedy in this country, and yet this global pandemic has the opportunity to expose the need for drastic change now. I think about my dad. My dad is someone who works as a janitor and cleans the juvenile hall. And he was taking time off, and I was concerned with him going to what are known hotspots of infection, right? Inside of youth jails and youth prisons. And so as an organization, we have been fighting to bring young people home from Camp Sweeney and from the Juvenile Justice Center. And now I think about him trying to return home from work, because he's now had to go back to work. And now with this curfew in place, I worry about some of the same things that were referenced earlier in terms of essential workers. And I've come to a place where this is not sustainable for me or my family anymore. And I think, you know, we've been here. And so I hope that everyone on the call understands the gravity of what's at stake, and understands that this is kind of the which side are you on moment of our history. Because as has been referenced, this is a sheriff that has retweeted the alt-right. And we look back in history and we can vilify folks like Bull Connor and their treatment of protesters in Alabama, but we have our own Bull Connors right here in the Bay Area. And so elected officials need to really clearly stand for justice, accountability, and immediate change. And that is an issue of life and death for people in a multiplicity of ways. And I think that that's being exposed in a way that that will be a turning point in our nation's history. We will either continue to double down on investment in strategies that have not produced safety for communities, and that have in fact produced death at disproportionate rates for communities of color, or we can invest in a social safety net that at the end of the day benefits all of us, and really look to remediate some of these harms that are not, again, back in decades ago in history, but are reoccurring in terms of the actions of some of our elected officials, including the Alameda County Sheriff.
Thank you so much, Zach, for all of your time, and Mia for joining us. I think this was a really much needed conversation. I think hopefully we can build off of this, and this is just the starting point. So I want to recognize your time and thank you for joining us and for sharing. Zach, I think if you could send us your book information and the other information, I would love to get that posted. You can either send it to Sarah in the chat, or send it over to Jim and I afterwards, and we can get it posted along with this. I think I want to make sure that the list of resources that you provided is available for folks to follow up on. And with that, I think we are going to transition over to a much lighter note, which is an update and actually somewhat connected, because I think part of what we were talking about was also resources and investing in various activities and programs. Zach, did you?
I just wanted to say thank you both. Thank you, Councilmember Oddie. Thank you, Councilmember Vella. I wanted to shout out Brett Webb and Amanda Cooper. Much love to you, Mia Bonta, and to Assemblymember Bonta for his support on these issues as well. So you all keep up the good fight and the good work. Lots of love to you all. Take care.
Thank you so much, Zach. All right. And so Zach was talking earlier about resources, and I think it's also great that we have Mia Bonta on from the school district. We also have on the call today Amy Wooldridge, and one of the things that we do need to invest in are things like childcare, youth programming, things like that, especially right now more than ever. And so Amy's here to give us a little bit of an update on our parks programming and camps. We just had an email, I think, that went out. I think part of what's difficult about COVID is getting the word out about what's happening. So Amy.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Malia, and thank you, Councilmember Oddie. So I'm going to give you a quick update on what Alameda Recreation Parks Department is doing for kids this summer. We are planning in-person camps. Our top priority really is the safety of our youth, our staff, and our community. But we also recognize the mental health needs of our youth and our community and their social development in a safe way. So we're excited now. So we are going to be offering programs for 5 to 12-year-olds, 5 to 10-year-old elementary and teen and tween programs for 6th to 8th graders. It will look very different than it did in previous summers. We're protocols. In many ways, we're going back to our what I call our old school roots with predominantly outdoor local activities in small groups. So essentially, we're offering our what we call our WOW, World of Wonder for elementary age. At a variety of different parks, we'll have what we call stable groups of 12 children. So we have no more than 12 kids in each group. We're required to have a minimum 3-week session. So we'll have three-week sessions for the summer, and those 12 kids will be in that group and separate from all other groups. And that's because of that isolation, it limits the virus exposure, but it also allows the opportunity for us to have those kids outdoors without masks and using the same equipment together. And then we're using sanitization and safety protocols, but it allows them to return to a little bit of a sense of normalcy. We also will have daily wellness checks for staff and counselors, staff and campers each day, and we won't have any out-of-town field trips. So we're starting registration at 8 a.m. on Friday. And as I mentioned, we'll have our WOW camp, we'll have our tween camp, we'll have our 64-year-old day camp, but it'll be all at Alameda Beach this year. Normally our older kids go to Redwood Regional Park, but because we can't transport them all together, we're gonna do everything local here in Alameda at Crown Beach. We are canceling all drop-in programs. That includes our We Play and our parks and playgrounds and tiny tot camps. And unfortunately also all aquatics, because pools are not yet allowed to be open. We're hopeful that the guidelines do allow us to have kids in those groups of 12 have pool time. So we'll be working with the school district on options for that and see if we can include that as part of our regular camp program. So we're excited to offer it, and we're here for any questions, and I'm also happy to answer any questions. So thanks for having me.
Did we have any questions for Amy? Thanks, Amy, for coming on. I mean, I know our parks are very, very critical for people's mental health during this time. So thanks for everything you're doing.
And so Amy, to register, is that going to be all online? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. Yes, thanks for asking. All of the information is on our website. It's both online, or you can call or print out and mail a registration in, but there's no in-person registration. Our phone number is 510-747-PLAY, P-L-A-Y. And you can find us on the City of Alameda website, and all of the registration information is there. So we try to provide multiple access points for people to register, except for in-person.
Okay, thank you. And is priority given to Alameda residents? How will that work?
Yes, we are prioritizing out. For now, we're only registering Alameda residents. If we find spaces available, we will open that up, but right now it's only for Alameda residents. And what I think is actually a cool thing is normally our programs, our WOW program for elementary school kids is at Washington and Godfrey, but because of the small groups, we're actually going to be offering them at parks throughout the city. So people may have the opportunity to have them much closer to home and be able to walk to their local park for a campsite.
Awesome. And one last question, Amy. I know that we do a lot of programming with the school district. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I know Mia's here. You're still working on plans for fall, but can you talk a little bit about that at least from the ARPD standpoint?
Sure. So we don't know yet what our fall program plans will be. We are in close communication with the school district staff as they're developing their plans, and then we'll do our best to augment those within the county guidelines of these stable groups of children. So it'll be kind of a logistical puzzle to figure out, but we know it's important as parents are getting back to work and families are returning to work to provide that, both, as I mentioned, the mental health and just the childcare support. And so once the school district makes some decisions, we're in close contact so that we understand what those decisions are and can develop programs around it. And it's also important to know that Alameda Education Foundation is also offering, who partners with the school district, is offering virtual camps this summer. So parents can access that. And there's some few other in-person camps as well throughout the city.
Thank you so much, Amy. And Mia, did you want to add anything? Oh, Sarah, can we unmute her?
Thanks. I'll just add that the school board is going to be reviewing a potential schedule for next year over the course of our next few meetings. One of the critical things that we're looking at is whether we can do kind of a wholly in-person model, some kind of hybrid version of education in the fall, and also creating space for people to be entirely remote. So it is a puzzle for sure, and a lot of what we need to be able to attend to is understanding the kind of the flip side of the schedule for students who are not, if we pursue a hybrid model, who are kind of not in person for any given amount of time. So we're definitely going to need to be able to tap into our community partnerships and with our enrichment programs and ARPD and others. So really appreciate the collaboration from the city in that regard.
I think Sarah has to be muted because there's a meeting going on, but there was a question if Alameda Parks will be open to the public.
Yes, Alameda Parks continue to be open to the public. They have been this whole time, and I feel strongly have been an important outlet for many people. Please make sure you're staying 6 feet away from anyone who's not in your household and wearing masks when appropriate. And there are certain amenities within the parks that are not open. Playgrounds are not open. And we anticipate, unfortunately, after talking to county health officials, may not be open for a while. Basketball courts are not open, but tennis is now open as well as pickleball. And the golf course is open and the skate park is open. So as the county allows it, we're opening amenities within the parks, but all of the open grass areas and trails and athletic fields for people to just go hit a ball with their family are all available to the public.
Thank you. And then I think there were two kind of related questions for me and Malia. I think one person asked about a police commission and then another question about what steps we would take to reduce police violence. So you want to do that one first or you want me to? Either way.
Well, I think we used to have a police commission under our charter. It was actually removed a while back. So I don't know about steps being looked at for that. I do know that the Democratic Central Committee is looking at a sort of a commission for the county sheriffs. And I think Pamela Drake is circulating a resolution for that. But that's not something that has come up here and I believe would require a charter change. in terms of what are we doing, I think the question was about police accountability. I think it takes a number of different things. I'll just say, I think it takes people not just watching things, it takes people saying stuff, recording, as much as I hate to say it, these things have been happening forever. The difference, as Will Smith said, is that now they're finally being filmed. And so, don't just sit on the film footage. I think it's important for us to put it out there and have it be discussed. It's important for you to hold your elected officials accountable. But if we don't know about things, then we can't take action. And so I've really appreciated, like I said earlier, the people that have reached out. I think it's going to take all of us working on the societal changes, as I said, and then also, holding ourselves accountable, whether it's within policies or things like that. As individual council members, we do not oversee personnel, so we don't have the authority to, direct staff to hire or fire, but we certainly oversee the department policy. And I think now is the time to take a look at the policies that we have. If we're not seeing the behavior that we and the training, the results of training that we currently have, then we need to take a look at what we're doing and improve it and get feedback. And so I think some of the places that we're looking to are to members of the public. We're looking to our partners. There are nonprofits that take a look at policing policies and give feedback. I think that sort of outside perspective would benefit us greatly. Sometimes it's hard to see the change that you need to have from an internal perspective. And then I think it's also that, I think protest works. And I say this as somebody who's a member of the National Lawyers Guild and American Constitution Society. And I think that if you want to hold people accountable, that's another way of doing it and doing it publicly. So keep emailing us, letting us know, reporting things. I hope those of you who there's different types of privilege, but if you have it, use it. Part of that means not just being a silent bystander.
I'll just add to that. I agree with everything my colleague said. It comes back to accountability, and the folks that are accountable to us as council members are the city manager, the city clerk, and the city attorney, and then everyone else below them is accountable to them. And then we're of course accountable to all of you, the residents of Alameda. So I would say that, we each have to hold those that we can hold accountable. We have to expect transparency, and I think our police chief has committed to, at least in this particular instance, releasing all the videos and all the transcripts. So that's not what's happened in the past in other areas. So let's just understand that, I think more needs to be done, but this is still more than others have done. So, and appreciate that. And I do think, like I said in the beginning, we need to look at all of our policies, not backward looking, but forward looking, and how we can best ensure equal protection under the law for everybody. So Sarah, did you want to close up, or did you want us to, since you're, okay. Well, I'll go first and then pass it over to Malia to close. Thanks for doing this. Like I said, we've been absent for a couple of weeks and a lot has happened. But we appreciate everyone taking their time on a Wednesday afternoon. These town halls will be on the city's website, and I think they're also on Facebook Live. So if you weren't able to see the whole thing, or your friends weren't able to see it, there's other options so you can hear what Zach had to say, what Mia had to say, and the updates from Amy. And we just appreciate everything everyone is doing. And don't forget that a man died, and make sure we all exercise our First Amendment rights as Americans. Or residents of this country.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you all for your time and the commitment to participate. I think it's so important was at the Kneel-In in San Francisco earlier this week. It was incredibly powerful. And I think one of the biggest messages was if you aren't registered to vote, register to vote. The second thing is to vote. And I think that that's the top level of accountability, is the ballot box. You know, I appreciate the level of heightened engagement from our community members. I appreciate the thoughtful questions and conversation and a willingness and desire to do better. I think that we're working on doing better and being better. And I think if we continue to have that mentality as a community, it'll happen. So thank all of you for joining us today. I'm gonna head to Washington Park, and I hope to see some of you there from a distance. Thank you.